Buddhism to Greece as Dionysus, god of tragedy, is the topic for our presentation. Let me start with a question. In Hindu tradition in India, the Buddha eventually becomes one of the 10 avatars of God Viṣṇu. In Greek tradition, Dionysus is said to arrive from the east and join the Olympian gods. What if these two stories are not isolated myths, but responses to the same cultural and philosophical force that challenges their sets of philosophical beliefs and cultural practices? What if that force is Buddhism along with its culture? Now, before you dismiss this as fantasy, stay with me. I'm not claiming direct borrowing in a simplistic way. I'm talking about a flood of ideas, ethical, philosophical, and existential, that moved across cultures and reshaped them. Buddhism was in many ways a challenge to establish religious authority, ritual hierarchy, caste divisions, and metaphysical assumptions in India. So, what happens when a powerful new philosophy cannot be crushed? You absorb it, you tame it, you place it inside your system. That is how the Buddha becomes an avatar of God Viṣṇu. This was not an act of admiration alone, it was a strategic move. Instead of waging war against Buddhism, Hinduism incorporated it. By giving the Buddha a divine status, the threat was neutralized, even controlled. And the most interesting implication of this move is this: it quietly admits that Buddhism came from outside the core of Hindu culture, from another land, another stream of thought. I suggest that it was from Sri Lanka. Something very similar happens in ancient Greece. Think about Dionysus. He is not originally Greek. Greek myth repeatedly insists on this. Dionysus arises from the east. He is foreign, unsettling, disruptive. He challenges rigid social hierarchies, the division between master and slave, male and female roles, Greek versus barbarian identities. This disruption appears in philosophy, especially through sophists, and in theater, especially tragedy, through playwrights like Euripides. So, what does Greek tradition do? It turns this disruptive force into a god, not just any god, but the god of wine, ecstasy, theater, and tragedy. Why wine? Because wine dissolves boundaries, it loosens identity, it unsettles order. Dionysus becomes the divine container for a cultural force that Greece could not ignore, but also could not fully control. Here's what it gets really interesting. The philosophical heart of Buddhism is dukkha, the reality of suffering, its cause, its cessation, and the path leading to that cessation. Now listen to the words attributed to Silenus, the companion and mentor of Dionysus. The best thing is not to be born. The second best is to die soon. This is not cheerful Greek optimism. This is a stark, almost Buddhist recognition of suffering. And Silenus himself is not Greek. He comes from the East. He embodies a worldview deeply concerned with the unsatisfactoriness of existence. Is it a coincidence that Dionysus becomes the god of tragedy? Tragedy becomes the highest dramatic form, and tragedy revolves around suffering, inevitability, and insight gained through pain. I don't think so. Take Sophocles' King Oedipus, for example. Oedipus, as the Buddha did, was born on a full moon day, embarks on a quest for truth, attains symbolic kind of enlightenment again on a full moon day, and ends in symbolic death also on a full moon day. Birth, awakening, passing away all happen on a full moon day. We even hear what sound very much like Nibbutha verses in King Oedipus. In the conversation between Oedipus and Jocasta with the Corinthian messenger, there is an implied prediction. If Oedipus leaves the Theban palace, he could become a Chakravarti, an all-powerful righteous king. But if he remains and continues his inquiry, he will realize the truth, no matter the cost. And what does Oedipus choose? He vehemently refuses the path of worldly power. He rejects kinship, even when it is offered as a way out. Instead, he chooses the quest for truth, fully knowing it may destroy him. That quest turns inward, and when the truth is finally attained, it cost him his eyes. What we see here is not just tragedy, it's a philosophical journey. Oedipus searches within himself, confronts suffering, uncovers its cause, and accepts the consequences of knowing. In that sense, the structure of King Oedipus closely mirrors the life pattern of the Buddha, especially when read through Buddhist reflections on dukkha and its causes. And then comes Oedipus at Colonus. The continuation moves even closer to renunciation, peace, and transcendence. Here we hear the famous line, "The best thing is not to be born. The second best is to die soon." This echoes a deeply Buddhist recognition of the unsatisfactory nature of conditioned existence. There is another striking parallel. In Jambudvipa, kings tried to fight over the Buddha's relics. In Greece, the Thebans and Athenians struggle over the remains of Oedipus. In both cases, the body of one who has attained insight becomes a site of power, protection, and legitimacy. Now, this does not mean Sophocles copied Buddhism. What it suggests is something subtler and more interesting. Greek myth says Dionysus came from Asia. To legitimize him, the myth makes him the son of Zeus and Semele. But here jealousy forces Zeus to hide infant Dionysus in the east on Mount Nysa. Where is Nysa? Sources are unsure. The tradition assumes that it could be in Ethiopia. Lydia, the present-day Turkey. India, around Afghanistan and Pakistan. Arrian, who accompanied Alexander the Great, is skeptical of identifying Nysa in northwest India, in an area between Afghanistan and Pakistan. If this were truly the sacred childhood home of Dionysus, it should have been a major pilgrimage site. But no such tradition exists there. So where is Nysa? Now consider Adam's Peak in Sri Lanka. Here's what we know. Persian and Arab sources, including Ibn Battuta and Ashraf, report Alexander visiting Adam's Peak. Later pilgrims Marco Polo, Giovanni Marignoli, and even Ibn Battuta visited it. No comparable pilgrimage tradition exists for any Nysa in India. Adam's Peak is sacred to Buddhists, Hindus, Muslims, and Christians. Buddhists identify it as bearing the Buddha's footprint. It is so reported in Mahavamsa, the Sri Lankan historical chronicle. The event is written on stones. Hindus associate it with Shiva. Muslims and Christians see it as Adam's first landing place. It is remote. It is mountainous. It is paradise-like. It is described as a bridge between earth and heaven. Arthur C. Clarke, a science fiction writer, called it a ladder to the heaven. These descriptions match the mythic language used for Mount Nysa far better than any mainland location. Ptolemy's map of Taprobane, present in Sri Lanka, marks at a place around Kataragama, Beki Oppidum, city of Bacchus, Dionysus Promontorium, and Dionysus Mea, or Sea of Dionysus. These are not random names. They suggest that Greek geographers associated this island with Dionysian tradition long before modern speculation. So what is Dionysus? My proposal is simple, but radical. Dionysus is not just a god. He's a mythologized cultural memory, a memory of a philosophical and spiritual current that came from the East, possibly from Sri Lanka, and entered Greece as something unsettling, liberating, and transformative. That current is Buddhism, not as doctrine, not as scripture, but as a way of suffering, truth and liberation. And just as India made the Buddha an avatar of God Viṣṇu to contain the disruption, Greece made this force a god, Dionysus, and gave it wine, theatre, and tragedy, not to destroy it, but to survive it.